Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of International Webinar on Best Practices in Research, organized by St. Bergman's College Research Committee and IQAC. I'm Jithan K. Thomas, Assistant Professor in MBA Department of St. Bergman's College. For today's keynote speech on publishing in international journals, do's and don'ts, we have Dr. Justin Paul, Professor at Graduate School of Business, University of Puerto Rico, USA. To welcome our speaker, I invite Dr. Joe Prasad Matthew, Research Director at St. Bergman's College. Over to you, sir.
Good evening all, and good morning, Dr. Justin. Respected Principal, Vice Principals, Speaker of the webinar, colleagues, PG students, research scholars, teachers from different institutions. Today is the second session of the webinar series titled International Webinar on Best Practices in Research, Research Proposal, Research Publications, and Research Ethics, organized by St. Bergman's College Research Committee and IQAC. As I said in the inaugural session, the new educational policy and the UGC regulations has put forward various measures to enhance the quality of higher education and research output. The webinar aims to make aware the researchers about the current trends and needs for carrying out good research and quality output in a timely manner. Each talk in the series aims at providing useful tips and information for making good research proposals, research publication in high-impact journals, and the do's and don'ts in research. With this small remark, let me welcome the speaker of the day, Dr. Justin Paul. Dr. Justin serves as Editor-in-Chief of International Journal of Consumer Studies UK and an Associate Editor of Journal of Business Research USA. A former faculty member with the University of Washington, he is a full professor of PhD and MBA programs in the University of Puerto Rico, USA. He holds 3 honorary titles as Distinguished Professor with 3 reputed universities in India, Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune, and MS University, Tirunelveli. I am happy and thankful that in spite of such busy schedule, Dr. Justin is kind enough to accept our invitation and find time to spare a few hours with us to share his views on publishing in international do's and don'ts. I extend our warm welcome to Dr. Justin on behalf of St. Bergman's Research Committee and IQAC of the college. I extend a hearty welcome to Principal Dr. Jacob Matthew and all faculty members of the college to the webinar. I also extend a hearty welcome to all participants of the webinar. A special thanks to Professor Jitin, Dr. Sibi, Dr. Robin, Dr. Philip Lito, Jobin, Prino, and Tojo for the technical and other helps, and all my colleagues in Research Committee for arranging the webinar effortlessly. Thank you and wish you all a wonderful session ahead. Over to Jitin.
Thank you. I think you are. Please unmute.
Thank you, Joseph. Let me introduce the speaker for the benefit of all the participants. Dr. Justin Paul is a distinguished professor and editor-in-chief of International Journal of Consumer Studies, an A-ranking ABDC journal. Also, editor-in-chief, associate editor of Journal of Strategic Marketing, another A-ranking ABDC journal. He is also an associate editor of European Journal Management Journal. He is the youngest full professor at Graduate School of Business under the University of Puerto Rico, USA. Former faculty member of University of Washington. He, as Dr. Joe introduced, he holds 3 honorary titles of distinguished professorship, including 1 in our own IAMK. He is also renowned as an author and co-author of best-selling books such as Business Environment, Export-Import Management, international marketing, and service marketing, among others. Dr. Paul introduced the Mastiff model as a measure for brand management, the CPP model for internationalization, Scope framework for small and medium enterprises, and 7P framework for international marketing. He has articles. His articles have been downloaded over 7 lakh times during the last 6 years. He has published over 75 papers in journals, in SSCI journals, and over 100 papers in Scopus journals. He has also published 3 best-selling cases with Ivy and Harvard Business Schools. He has visited more than 30 countries for academic work. Without any delay, let's hear from him. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Jitin. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, everything is fine. So thank you for inviting me for this session. I would try to share some of my experiences as an author and editor, and I will also try to give you some specific do's and don'ts when it comes to publishing in international journals. I would prefer, in case if we can have interaction and questions and answers, so that I can answer your specific questions, and we can do that twice. After 20 minutes, we can have 10-15 minute question session, and then towards the end of the session also, I would be happy to answer your questions. Yeah, so we can have an interaction that way, so that webinar will be more effective. I would prefer to start with my first set of PowerPoint in general, and then towards the second half of my session, I would specifically list out certain do's and don'ts. Let me open my PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
It is loading, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I would begin with my experience as an author. As a researcher in the field of business studies, I received a lot of rejections in the beginning of my career. Initially, when I did my PhD, I was not sure if I want to be a researcher, because in terms of workload, research takes more time than teaching. Teaching is much more easier than research. In those days, referencing was an issue. Those days, managing a research paper also involved some clerical work, getting outside help from different people to do those kind of proofreading and those kind of referencing work was also a challenge. But these days, everything is possible with software and all those kind of things. I would come to those points a bit later. So now, my focus would be on where to publish and how to publish, and what are the ideas, or what are the keep in mind do's and don'ts. Publishing in premier journals in science subjects, researchers talk about SCI. In social sciences, researchers talk about SSCI. So always good to think about publishing in journals listed on SCI or SSCI, because they have an impact factor and they are recognized worldwide, and you get worldwide coverage. How much time or how long it takes for an article to get accepted or to get published? It used to take a year, like 5 or 10 years ago, it used to take a year because everything was slow. But these days, a lot of things are faster. So on an average, it takes about 4 months to a year these days. So sometimes if you're lucky, your paper get accepted in 3 to 4 months. But if your paper, in case, this is the case in business, economics, and commerce subjects. In natural sciences, it can be different. So on an average, it still takes 4 months to 8 months time these days. And desk rejection, yeah, there is something called desk rejection. You might have experienced rejection by editor before sending to peer reviewers. In natural science, desk rejection percentage is relatively less, but in social sciences, desk rejection percentage is relatively high. Many journals desk reject approximately 50 to 60 or 70% of the submissions in social sciences. Yeah, so I started my research career, which is 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, when I started my research career, I didn't know what to do and how to do and what kind of dimensions are required to publish in truly global, international, premier journals. I was confused, and because sometimes, so if you have an opportunity to do a PhD with a very well-accomplished supervisor, those who have really good track record of research, half of your future is taken care of. But if your supervisor is not having that much track record, sometimes you are not guided properly. This happens with many people. If you're not guided properly by a PhD supervisor, sometimes you don't end up publishing not even 1 or 2 papers in international journals. So certain things that you have to keep in mind, which I learned based on my own experience, because my PhD supervisor was not very well accomplished researcher. So I had to learn a lot of things my own. So, but I learned, I tried my best, and I took a lot of efforts, and I finally published more than 100 papers, and some of my papers are most downloaded papers these days. And yeah, so let's try to look at specifically what are some specific points to keep in mind when you think about submitting a paper or developing a research paper. Your goal has to be creating new knowledge. There's a difference between new knowledge and old knowledge. For example, journal editors look for new knowledge, which means papers on relatively new topic, papers on untapped topic, papers on a topic where there are not many studies are published. Replicating a study in China is not general. For example, replication studies. Many researchers do replication study. For example, someone has done a study in American context, and you can do that in Indian context. That can be a replication. That will be considered as a replication study. But some journals publish replication studies. They do not prefer replication studies, but many of them publish replication studies. But originality, studies with originality get preference compared to studies, those who have replication nature. Yeah, and however, top journals do not tend to publish replication studies. So keep in mind that replication studies don't get accepted in all journals. Some journals you might get acceptance, but not in all journals. So what is important is, for example, you have a model in your study, in your research. Your model should work in setting A, and it should also work in setting B. This is what journals look for. For example, what you're talking about in Indian context should be also applicable, should be also working in British or American or European context. For example, you can try to prove a theory wrong. That can be a challenge. That can be an interest of many people. Or you can have a, that kind of argument. So you can develop a new theoretical model. This is not moving. Okay. Journal editors' goals. Journal editors normally prefer to enhance the integrity and reputation of the journal. For that reason, they want papers with topics that fit the focus of the journal, and they look for new ideas, they look for interesting papers, and they also are interested in increasing downloads and citations for their journal. So they look for such papers. For example, generalization. Many journals these days look for what you can generalize based on your study. Your study can be based on data from India or Kerala or China, but what what are the takeaways from your study for the global audience? How does global audience get benefited based on your study? So do you have something to offer for the global audience? Because journals want to cater to the global audience. Whatever they publish should be useful for the global audience. Author's goals. I talked about editor's goals. Now I will talk about author's goals. The goal of an author should be to publish articles to demonstrate productivity, published articles to maintain position, to demonstrate competency in the subject area, and sometimes to graduate from some PhD programs. Some of the PhD programs in different countries do have a requirement of publishing 1 or 2 papers as part of getting PhD awarded. Even China has that requirement. And to obtain job perks, extra salary, extra incentives. For example, in India, IIMs are offering Indian rupees, 10 lakh rupees for a publication in a category journal of Australian Business Dean Council. So this is an extra perk offered by top business schools in different countries for publishing. And jobs. Many times people get jobs if they have very good publications. For example, I know at least 2 faculty members at IIM Kozhikode. They got faculty job at IIM Kozhikode because of their publication. Their PhD is from an unknown institution. Entire education is from unknown institution like ICFAA, ICFI. But they have a faculty position at IIM because of their publications. So publications are considered as important in top business schools in India as well as outside India. New, innovative, and interesting ideas get published. Yeah, so this is important. Also, ideally, before you submit a journal, you have to look at whether you have a reference from that journal. So submit to journal from where you have at least one reference. Sometimes co-authorship matters. I'm giving different ideas. For example, if you have a co-author who is very well known, who is very well reputed, sometimes that helps you. This is how this happens in almost all fields. For example, you have a Nobel Prize winner, or you have someone who is likely to get a Nobel Prize, someone who is very well renowned in your subject area, and in case if he is a co-author, there's a chance that your paper might get eventually accepted, but they have to go for peer review and all those processes. For the same time, eventually you have a good chance to get acceptance if you have a very well-known co-author. Or if you have a co-author working with some top schools like Harvard, Stanford, so in this situation also you have a very good chance. Yeah, so when you submit the paper, there is a letter, what is called as covering letter or cover letter to the editor, introducing your article. So this is very important many times because you can highlight. Many times editors don't have time to read the entire article because they get hundreds of manuscripts daily basis or monthly basis, but they can definitely read this cover letter. So what is original? Uniqueness and newness and novelty of your paper can be highlighted in your cover letter to the editor. Sometimes you can impress editor based on this cover letter. Yeah. So that way, editor can go through this and editor can assess the potential of your paper based on your cover letter. Clear, you have to mention the scope and contribution of your paper very clearly and precisely in your cover letter. This cover letter also works as actually you are trying to sell your article to the editor. To some extent it is required. In colloquial words, you can say that you are actually trying to sell to the editor, because editor is a buyer in this case, and you are a seller in this case. Author is a seller in this case. You have to assume that you are doing that job, and editor has to buy your paper. And you can also review the aim and objectives of the learner, emphasize this in the letter. Convince the editor that you thought about his or her journal and the linkage to your manuscript. Appropriate keywords for Scholar One. Yeah. So, for example, journals use software, so you might have to identify some keywords from the journal software along when you submit a paper. So it has to be, your paper needs to be related to the journal, because you have to look at what is the journal's focus areas, and you have to submit to a journal from where you're focused. That is why I mentioned, so if you have a citation from the journal, that shows that your paper is relevant to that journal. Title and abstract. Editors try to ensure poor papers are not sent out for review. Many times, as I mentioned, desk rejection rate is 50 or 60% in many journals. And so they have to look at whether this paper is good enough or whether the paper is bad. So they will not send out your paper for review in case if your paper is not great. And you have to also keep in mind, reviewers are actually doing voluntary service. Reviewers normally do not get paid for their review. So many times, reviewers decline the invitation to review. This is a challenge for an editor. At the same time, editors will have to do a good job, because they have to actually ensure the quality of your work. And so since many reviewers decline invitations, editors send out papers to reviewers only in case if the paper has minimum standard. So it is an author's responsibility to submit a paper with minimum standard. If your paper does not have minimum standard, please do not submit to a journal. Last month, a friend of mine from Indore, he sent me a paper by email. Actually, journal submissions are online, and he asked me to publish this paper since he has met me. And this paper, when I spend my time, I spent 2 hours to look at this paper, since I thought maybe a friend of mine has sent me a paper, I should spend time to look at this paper. This paper had hundreds of problems, ranging from language quality issues to structuring the paper. Everything was problematic. His PhD student tried to do something, and he's a professor, and he just added his name and he tried to send it to me, and I wasted my 2-3 hours of my time. So sometimes if you do submit that kind of papers, editors will not be happy with you, and they will not be in a position to help you, and they will even sometimes get irritated with you. So make sure that you take care of those kind of things before you submit a paper. An abstract of your paper needs to be very precise and very clear. Editors will get time to read title and abstract. Whatever you write in abstract need to be precise, very clear, need to be. And your title of your article, normally it can be 6 words or it can be 8 words. And it has to be an interesting title. Yeah, abstract. Almost all journals requires abstracts. You have to highlight research question being investigated, and you have to highlight the contribution of your paper. You have to highlight findings of your paper. What did you find in this paper need to be highlighted in the abstract. Normally it is less than 200 words. So you should know how to articulate your abstract and write your abstract within 200 words. Yeah, so this is a picture how many reviewers think. Many reviewers, when they get an invitation to review a paper, they think this way. Some of my good and close friends have thought about this way when I sent reviewer invitation to them. This is because people just want to do paid job. They don't want to do free job or voluntary job. So I would say that if you actually want to build a rapport with the journal, you have to make sure that you are known to the editors as reviewers. If you build rapport with the different journals as a reviewer, and if you do good review, detailed review, proper review, then if you submit a paper after 2-3 months, after doing a couple of reviews for a journal editor might have mindset to help you. But if you decline a review invitation, journal editor will reject your paper also. So this happens in the field. So make sure that if you get a review invitation, or make sure that in case if you want to build a rapport with the journal, you start with reviewing a paper and also submit very detailed review, page by page review, rather than doing a review for the sake of doing review, because it is the job of editors to make sure that editor publishes papers without problems, only perfect papers, because otherwise editor will be at risk if editor accepts papers with problems. Yeah. Sometimes some tips about abstract and introduction. Some authors submit papers where they will have grammatical errors even in abstract and introduction. If 1 or 2 grammatical errors are there in abstract and introduction, journal will reject it. So make sure that, make sure that you don't use any confusing acronyms in the paper, because either editor or reviewers will reject your paper. Importance of writing and writing quality. It's very important. And some journals do have guidelines, some journals do not have guidelines. These days, most journals have implemented free format policy, because Elsevier implemented this as a pioneering publishing company, and other publishers are also for free format submission. So these days, you don't have to spend all your time for formatting paper, because most of them consider free format only in case if your paper is going to be accepted, only if you get revision. So they care formatting these days. Otherwise, 90% of the journals in business subjects do not have strict formatting requirements. I mean, in terms of reference format, you can submit references in APA or MLA or Harvard format. They consider, they don't reject for that reason. That means you can save some time. So I used to think, like when I was in my early stages of my career, I used to think that this was taking all my time. For example, I was a full-time faculty with IIM, and when I was a full-time faculty with IIM, I did not prefer to spend my time for formatting different articles. So that was because that was a time-consuming job. And these days, since journals have made it free format policy, so it's a good thing that authors can spend more time for academic work rather than doing this referencing work. And ensure that your paper is proofread or professionally copy edited before you submit. You can give your paper to someone who can write English without mistakes. It could be someone from your own college, or it could be your own student, or it could be someone who does this on freelance basis. There are websites like Upwork.com offering a lot of freelancers to do this kind of proofreading, and you can negotiate with different proofreaders and get competitive price. Publishing companies also offer proofreading services, but it can be expensive. So make sure that you get it proofread and professionally copy edited before you submit a paper. Otherwise your paper might get rejected for that reason. Reviewers' decision. Reviewers, sometimes your paper will go to an experienced reviewer, sometimes your paper will go to an inexperienced reviewers. And you have to also try to ensure that you sell your study to the reviewer. It's important. And establish importance of your article in the introduction itself. Your introduction is very critical. And you have to identify research gaps and say that no one has done this study, and this is a pioneering study, and this is the first attempt to do this. You have to present it that way. This is important. And you should have updated theories, or you should not have outdated theories, but you should have updated, relatively new theories, and you should present it as a new study. It's important. Also, in the introduction, in the last paragraph in the introduction, provides the reader a roadmap of how your paper is going to flow. This is important. Last sentence in the last paragraph in the introduction, a roadmap of your paper with different structures, different sections, structure of your different sections. It's important. And literature review, your literature review is important. Cite relatively new papers, cite recent papers in literature review. Many people cite outdated papers. You have to cite new papers, like papers published during last 5 years, specifically last 3 years. It should be cited in your paper. Then only reviewers will be happy to accept your papers. Otherwise, if reviewers see all your citations are very, very old, they will not consider your paper. You need to cite last 2-3 years of papers. Then you know that clearly conveys the message that you have studied or you are aware of recent developments in your field. It's important. Literature review should be primarily based on last 5 years papers. And you can also try to create theory or verify theory or extend theory, because many journals prefer papers with theoretical flavor. A theory emerges from disparate literature and humanistic inquiry and generalization. Theoretical verifications, Americans tend to favor verifications, and creation and verification result in triangulation. So this can be debatable. So webinar has its own constraint. However, we can discuss in case if we have questions. Contribution. There are empirical papers, there are conceptual papers, there are literature review papers, case study based papers. But however, in all types of papers, if you can bring theoretical favor, you have a better possibility. Yeah. Now, I would share some more thoughts, and then I can take up some questions. Yeah, so I do have another set of PowerPoint slide to focus specifically on 10 do's and some 10 don'ts. So I do have some of my videos related to research and teaching on my YouTube channel. YouTube, I just set up a new channel, youtube.com/Dr. Justin Paul. You can visit and subscribe to the channel also to get this kind of videos, recorded videos on research and teaching. And this is my email, and profjust@gmail.com. And I have another set of slides. Before I go to another set of slides, I would like to check with you. You have any questions so that I can articulate your questions and answer your questions with the help of my do's and don'ts. The first set of slides that I presented is in general. Second set of PPT that I have is going to be more specific do's and don'ts. Would you like to have some questions right now or later?
Participants, if you have any questions right now, you can raise it in the chat box. Dr. Paul will answer it right away before going to the next session.
Otherwise, let them write now, and then I can go ahead with, and then you can ask questions after my after I finish this next set of slides. Is it okay?
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I will talk specifically on do's and don'ts. Yeah, some specific do's. This is because in order to publish my 100+ research papers, more than 2,000 rejections in my life. Number of rejections in my life when I was in my early 30s what I get these days. So I have learned a lot of things based on rejection, based on reading comments from different editors and reviewers. And I have succeeded in research. And finally, even though I got a lot of rejections, finally I managed to publish my papers. And I am very delighted, or I'm very proud that my articles turned out to be, most downloaded papers. And these days, the total number of my downloads, in terms of those downloads, I'm one of the most downloaded authors in the world in subject business and economics, if you put it together, because my articles got thousands of downloads. So based on my experience, what kind of papers get downloads, what kind of papers get accepted, and what kind of papers get rejected, I have developed these do's and don'ts. I also work as chief editor of International Journal of Consumer Studies. We get 100 plus papers submissions every month. The journal, these journals where I'm chief editor, we accept about 5 or 6% submissions, because yearly, like this year, in 9 months, we got more than 1,000 submissions. So this year we are likely to get 1,400 submissions, and the maximum papers that we accept is 80 in a year. So 80 out of 1,400 submissions. So that means it is going to be 5 or 6% average acceptance rate. This is the same case, like Journal of Business Research has acceptance rate of 5.5 or 6%. So most of the business journals, top journals or premier journals, have the same type of acceptance rates. So on an average, you have to keep submitting to different journals to get a paper accepted, because the paper improves its quality that way. So some do's and don'ts, what I have today is, do number 1, follow generalized approach. Your paper should have generalized content. For example, you can use local data, but when you develop your sections like discussion, conclusion, or findings, you should write that with a generalized approach for the readers across countries. You have to keep in mind that this paper is submitted to a journal which this journal is interested in publishing something for the global audience rather than for a country audience. So you have to write with a generalized approach. For example, you can also begin your paper with the topic of your paper rather than talking about your country. Never begin a paper with your country context in your introduction section if you want to submit to an international journal. You start your paper, begin your paper with your topic rather than talking about your country. Number 2, provide the reader a roadmap of how this paper is going to flow. Last paragraph in the introduction section, talk about what section 2 is going to be, what is section 3, what is section 4, what is section 5, and like that. And number 3, highlight the originality of your study in abstract and introduction. Number 4, explain uniqueness of your study. Number 5, do plagiarism check. If I share my experience as an editor, I tell you 20% of the submissions are plagiarized in journals. I mean, submissions, when we come, we check with the software, journals have journal assistant give a kind of, point, and this is showing similarity percentage. And make sure that you check plagiarism before you submit the paper to a journal, because otherwise your reputation will be at stake. Even at IIM Ahmedabad, people have lost jobs because of plagiarism. So if you don't check this before you submit, it can cost you a lot. Sometimes you can lose your job if you end up publishing a plagiarized paper and somebody else find out that you have copied from their paper and all. So that can be an offense. And number 6, cite recent papers, preferably from the target journal. This helps. This helps to show that your paper is relevant to that journal. Number 7, do robustness checks such as multicollinearity in time series studies and common method bias in cross-section studies. If you have only single survey, do common method bias test these days, which was not very important 10 or 20 years ago in cross-section 1 survey-based studies, but it is considered as important these days. Number 8, get it English edited and proofread by someone else, because sometimes you are confident of your English standard. However, there could be some manual errors, mistakes. Mistakes are manual, mistakes are human. So if someone else read your paper, they can definitely find mistakes. One of my paper got published today. In that, there is one mistake which I didn't notice until it got published. There is one mistake, like one verb, plural, singular verb difference. We had 3 co-authors, none of us noticed, but still that error is there. We had to fix it later. So, number 9, derive hypotheses in an empirical paper. Hypotheses are very important in an empirical paper. If you have an empirical paper, derive hypotheses. If you have a qualitative paper, derive research questions. If you have a conceptual paper, derive theoretical and testable propositions. These are important. Yeah, I repeat, hypotheses in empirical paper, research questions in a qualitative paper, theoretical or testable proposition in a conceptual paper. Number 10, focus on findings of prior studies. This is important. You can even include a table. For example, findings of prior studies, when you do literature review, it has to be ideally part of your literature review. You can include a table with the findings of prior studies. For example, you find similar findings, you can pool them together and present it in the form of a table. And you can also corroborate or contrast your findings with the findings of prior researchers in your area. You can give this either in the literature review section or in the discussion section. Number 11, if you get revision from any journal, implement all the possible comments. Sometimes it could be challenging, sometimes it could be easy, but you have to try to implement all possible comments if you get revision, because your paper will go back to the same reviewers and they will get motivated to accept your paper if they see that you have implemented revision. If they see that you have not implemented revision, they can reject your paper even after revision. Number 12, select a topic with newness and novelty and avoid recycled topics. Number 13, focus on conceptual, analytical, and presentation dimensions. Yeah, now certain don'ts. So what are the points that you have to keep in mind, what you should not do when you submit a paper, when you develop a paper? Number 1, if you want to submit to an international journal or premier journal, don't cite from regional, local, or national journals. They are not considered as authentic. Number 2, avoid citations from websites if possible. 1 or 2 websites are okay, but not more than 1 or 2 websites. Websites are not considered as reliable or authentic. Number 3, don't include country or state name in title because you need generalized title. Focus on your subject in your title rather than country or state. Number 4, no need to spend a lot of time for changing format if journaler rejects your paper. Yeah, so no need to spend all your time to change format if journaler rejects your paper. 80% of journal editors do not care format, as most of them have implemented free format policy. Number 5, Don't submit to slow journals. Number 6, don't defend yourself if you get a revision. Yeah, if you get a revision, don't try to defend yourself. And number 5 is slow journals. You have to identify slow journals. For example, we conducted a rating or speed rating of journals last year. I have the data. In case if you want, you can send me an email. I can send it to you. Or you can also find it on my ResearchGate account. And ResearchGate is popular these days. And slow journals, some publishing companies are very slow after acceptance. You should be aware of them. For example, InterScience is a very slow publishing company. If your paper is accepted in any InterScience journal, they take about a year to publish online. So your paper will be online only after a year from the date of acceptance in any of the InterScience journals. So better don't submit to InterScience journals. On the other hand, Elsevier and Wiley takes only 1 week or 2 weeks to publish a paper after acceptance. Springer takes about 2 or 3 weeks. Taylor and Francis also publish a paper in 1 or 2 weeks' time. Emerald takes about 1 or 2 months' time. So you have to be aware of these companies and how fast they are or how slow they are. And number 7, I would recommend don't use recycled theories. Like theory of planned behavior, everybody has used. Better don't try to use it again and again because it has been used more than 20,000 times or 30,000 times. Yeah, so now I'll be happy to answer your questions.
There are a number of questions in the chat box. I'll read out for you, Dr. Paul. The first one was for Shamsha. Is it good to publish paper in a preprint archives before publication?
Preprint. So what you mentioned? I don't know what you talk about that thing. I'm not aware of what is a preprint archive. So it's not a common thing. So because these days, if a paper is accepted, as I said, Elsevier, Wiley, Springer, Taylor, and Francis, they are all able to publish a paper within 1 week actually after accepted. So why you need to only, I don't know about some unknown companies may have this kind of things, but very well-known established companies do not have this kind of thing.
Maybe he's asking about before completing the paper, some of the people publish it in their institute's website that they are working on this, and this is the thing. So a short form of the paper is already published on the institute website before finalizing.
I would say that you can do your abstract. I would not recommend you to publish your paper online because that might, because if you publish then their paper online, so if they generate similarity report, it will show that your paper is similar to that one. It's better avoid that.
Okay. So another question from Rashmi John: is there any free software available to check plagiarism?
I see. Turnitin is a very well-known software for plagiarism. At least 100 plus business schools in India has access to Turnitin, I'm sure. So if you have any friends with any university like Cochin University or IIM and all, if you do not have your software to check plagiarism, you send it to them and it takes only 10-minute job for them to check plagiarism on Turnitin. So free software, I'm not sure about the reliability of those softwares. I was told that Indian government has introduced some software called Gurukul or something like that. I don't know its name because I don't live in India these days. So even though I'm from Kerala, I live in America. But I don't know. You might know that software, right? So some free software is given to colleges, all colleges by government of India.
Yeah, it is available at universities and all.
University?
Yeah, it is available at the universities.
Okay. So, but yeah, because if you like there are free softwares which partly capture something like up to 500 words, but you have to cut and paste your article every 500 words. So, but it does not offer you a facility of all 10,000 words article to be checked for similarity in one go. So you might need to cut and paste several times and check it. And even I'm not 100% sure about the authenticity of the results from this free software.
Okay. Next question is about finding a journal for publication after completing an article is a good practice, or is it better to choose a target journal, then start working on a paper?
There is no thumb rule regarding this. I would say that you can keep in mind one or two journals in mind before when you develop the paper, but you have to ideally, as I said, you have to look at from what journals you have references. So you need to I would always do that. I would first try to complete the paper, at least the first draft of the paper, then think about the journal. So because I have to know that from what journals I have these references. If I do not have any reference from the target journals, then I cannot submit to that journal. So I have to at least finish my literature review part to decide the journal to which journal I'm going to submit. Otherwise, because if there is no reference from the journal where I want to submit, then it would not make sense to submit to that journal.
Okay. So even in other ways, after completing article, maybe you can revise it according to the journal.
You can add references from your target journal after completing the work too. So because this is a very flexible thing, you can. In case if you find a related reference, if they have published an article related to your topic, then you can add that reference from that journal website, and then you can submit that way too.
Okay. Now, Steffi JK has asked a question. Could you narrate the format of writing a conceptual paper in a social science?
Yeah, in a conceptual paper, you should ideally derive theoretical propositions. The goal of a conceptual paper is to develop theory, is to propose a theory or theoretical model. So propositions are considered as important. You derive propositions, theoretical propositions. And also you have to show that your conceptual model, you have to draw at least 2-3 figures in a conceptual model, because you're actually contributing towards some kind of conceptual model development or theoretical model development. So propositions and theoretical model in the form of figures are important. Proposition should be one-line sentence, but it should be, proposition look like a hypothesis, but they are not empirically tested in the hypothesis.
Okay. So there's another question from Anil Kudian Manor. He is asking, doesn't it need permission to take data from others to compare in tabular form? I believe you are speaking about presenting the result in tabular form, comparing with other findings. So he is asking, doesn't it require permission?
No, because you are reporting their findings in a tabular form, and you are in bracket, you write the author name. You are reporting their study findings with acknowledging their work, their author name.
So we can report it, but we just need to cite it, right?
Yes, you have to cite it.
So there's a question from Donna V. Ricula. How should the discussion part of a journal be?
Discussion part of your article?
The article. It should be discussion part of the article.
You have to focus on findings, your findings in your discussion part. So it can be, discussion part can be classified as, you have to interpret your findings first, and then implications of your findings, implications for theory, implications for managers. So you can classify discussion part under 3 subtitles. First, you write 1 paragraph of your interpretation of your findings, and then classify your discussion section, ideally with some subtitles like implications for theory, implications for managers, or implications for practitioners, implications for managers and practitioners, same. And then one more subsection, you can have limitation and direction for future research. So these 3 are ideally supposed to be in the discussion section.
Okay. There's a question from Ranjit Thomas. If 2 reviewers take contradictory decisions, how will an editor take a decision?
Editor will look at the paper, editor will read the paper, and editor has a lot of power, editor has a lot of discretionary power. And some papers have 2 reviewers, some papers have 3 reviewers, some papers have 4 reviewers. So, like in my journal, we have a new rule. When I took over the journal in March, we had only 2 reviewers mandatory requirement, but now we have increased. We have a requirement of minimum 3 reviewers. So because we have to ensure the quality, because we are getting hundreds of submissions, so we have to ensure quality. That's why we have 3 reviewers requirement. But some papers, some journals have only 2 reviewers. In that case, editor will use editor's discretionary power. Sometimes there are 4 reviewers. 2 reviewers will recommend acceptance, and 2 reviewers will recommend rejection. In that case, editor will use editor's discretion.
Okay, in that case, your work will be more difficult.
I mean, editors are supposed to read the article before any decision is made. Editors cannot 100% rely upon reviewers, because ultimately editors are responsible. All chief editors get paid for their job. Editors actually, I mean, even though it's not very attractive remuneration, editors get remuneration. Editors also have an opportunity to be globally recognized, because if you are working as chief editor of a globally recognized A grade or A star grade journal, so your name is very well known all across the countries, all across the world. So that way you have recognition. So you are supposed to read the paper before your acceptance, because if you publish it, accept a paper with problems, you are also responsible for that. It is like if an IAS officer is let's say recruiting somebody who does not have required qualification, sometimes it happens. If editor is accepting a paper with problems, it is like an IAS officer recruiting somebody who does not have required qualification. So editors have to go by merit, minimum standard, and merit is minimum requirements.
There is a related question on that. Malayadi Pacha has asked, why reviewers are not paid honorarium? Because the total quality of the journal lies on the reviews also. Yeah,
so this is a very big $1 million question. So publishers need to answer this question. So publishers have to change their policy to pay to the reviewers. But the system is created that way, and I would be happy in case if all publishers come together and decide to pay to the reviewers.
Okay, that's your opinion. Okay. Now, Swati Mohan asks, sir, you said that don't cite from national journals. She says, is it correct? I think it is our responsibility to promote national level quality journals, and maybe we need to cite from national level journals also.
I mean, if your citations are from national, local journals, I mean, if you're submitting to a national journal, you can cite from national journal. So if you're not submitting to national journal, if your citations are from national journal, international journal reviewers and editors would not be convinced about the quality of those journals. If they have never heard about that journal, they would not be happy.
Okay. So we have another question. Vinita is asking, so how do we know if a journal is predatory? Where can we find information about predatory journals?
You have to keep the list. For example, if you are a business researcher, you can download lists like Australian Business Deans Council list, UK Association of Business Schools list. So these are list of journals where Australian Business Deans Council list includes about 4,000 journals in business and economic subjects. And so you have to look at whether the journal is in any of those lists before you submit a paper. If there are 4,000 journals included in ABDC list, or there are about 2,000 journals included in UK ABS list. So UK ABS list is better cream, but ABDC list has some national journals also. So you have to keep those lists with you. They are online, they are freely downloadable.
Okay. There's a question. Please suggest any reference on reporting SPSS output in research papers.
Please suggest a
reference. Any reference on reporting SPSS output in research papers?
Reference SPSS, there are several books. SPSS manual can also be reported as a reference, and there are many books, at least 25 books are there written by different authors on SPSS manual. So you can cite any of those books, or SPSS manual itself can also be cited when you want to report something. Yeah, so please look at any research paper published in any premier journal where how they have cited, how they have referenced SPSS outputs. So it's not complicated, it's easy to do.
Okay. So there's another question. How easy it is to identify whether journal charges for publication?
None of the business journals in marketing or human resource management or organizational behavior or strategic management or information technology, they have no charges. Only predatory journals have charges. But in finance field, in finance and financial economics, or some economics journals, they do have submission fee. Then some of these finance journals, they pay honorarium to the reviewers. That is the reason they are charging submission fee. The finance journals, some of them, a majority of them, 90% of the world-class finance journals, they have a submission fee. And when they take submission fee, they tend to, or they pay to the reviewers. This is how they work. But non-finance journals in social sciences subjects, any of the social sciences subject, non-finance, no submission fee.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Nitin John. He's asking, in the do's and don'ts for journal articles, you have suggested to focus on the conceptual, analytic, and presentation dimensions. Could you kindly explain this further?
Yeah, in any research paper, a research paper will turn out to be a perfect paper if you have all these three dimensions. Conceptual dimension simply means you need to have theoretical flavor. You should apply a theory, or you should develop a theory. Either apply someone else's theory or develop your own theory or propose your own theory. That is what is conceptual dimension. What is the conceptual takeaway from your paper? Analytical dimension. Do you have primary data or secondary data? So data analysis. Analytical dimension is based on data analysis. So you need to have some type of analysis, some type of data, so that and that need to be interpreted in a nice and effective way, in a generalized way for the maximum audience. So that is analytical data. That is presented in the form of tables and figures. I would suggest that all papers should have at least one figure. Your theoretical model that you develop in your paper should be also presented in the form of a figure. So those are part of those contribute towards your analytical dimension. And presentation dimension is nothing but how you write your paper, how you structure your paper from abstract to conclusion.
Okay, thank you for that. George Matthew is asking, is there any mobile application to find out the latest publication information?
Latest publication information. What do you mean by latest publication information?
Publication, that's what he has asked. He might be asking, is there any mobile applications developed in the publication area?
ResearchGate has a mobile app. ResearchGate, I have ResearchGate mobile app on my phone. So ResearchGate is a very popular platform these days where you can download research papers free of cost. And if your university or college is not subscribing to paid databases, use ResearchGate. You can contact almost every author to get papers free of cost. And this is an app, mobile app, and they also have a website, and you can be a member on ResearchGate and Google Scholar. You can actually these days search almost all papers on Google Scholar. So use Google Scholar to search papers, and it will generate a link to download papers, some free links and some paid links, and ResearchGate app also you can use.
So the last question, Donna is asking how lengthy the discussion part of the article should be, and she is asking that is she is looking at particularly for biology journal, but how lengthy should be the discussion part?
In natural sciences like biology, you don't need very elaborated papers, because the papers that I see in natural sciences, they are very precise. But for example, the total word length of a natural science paper can be even 4,000 words. But in social sciences, most papers are 7,000, 8,000 words. Yeah. So discussion section in a natural science like biology can be very precise that way, because total size of paper is not very lengthy. They don't expect lengthy papers in natural sciences.
Okay. So I believe that concludes the Q&A session. That was the last question. Do you have any more comments to say? Dr. Paul, do you have any more comments for the participants?
No, if they have any questions, I can answer. Otherwise, we can wind up.
I think that was the last question. There are no more questions which has come up in the last 5 minutes or so. So that was the last question. So to sum up, I will conclude this. I'll conclude it by a vote of thanks. To conclude, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks to Dr. Justin Paul. He has been kind enough to accept our invitation to the international webinar on best practices in research. He has taken pain to attend this conference despite the time difference. Right now, I believe it's something around 8:30 there. So he has enlightened us on the various aspects of getting a published in a reputed journal, especially in the social science area. He especially put for light on importance of the covering letter, the abstract, the introduction, and generalizing the findings of the paper. And he has set upon the focus on conceptual, analytical, and presentation dimension. Okay. On behalf of St. Bergman's College, the research committee, IQAC, and all the participants of this conference, I thank you for spending this precious time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Okay, thank you.
Fine.
Thank you for coming and participating in this session. Thank you for the time and patience.
It was an excellent program. Excellent master of the subject.